We are starting off with Bitcoin as always. I want to first follow up on the short-term timeframes as we do have the new week opening for CME and of course the last week closing for spot price action, which is going to really play into some big signals that are going to be resolved. Two of them today, one of them at the end of this week, and then the biggest one is going to be the monthly, of course, at the end of Saturday, I believe it is. Anyways, with that in mind, we'll start with the short-term timeframes right here. And as always, I like to start with CME when it is a Monday, of course, as it typically does have just better signals in general. And as we can see right now, Bitcoin obviously slinking down, and we do see that it is, potentially going to put in a little bit of a bounce, maybe after heading slightly lower, somewhere around the top side of this blue box territory would be fair game. But ultimately, all bounces are failures as long as Bitcoin is, especially below 40,400. But I'd go as far to say that as long as Bitcoin's below 41,500, there's really no, the hopium technically isn't like dead. It's not relevant as far as I'm concerned. Now, with that in mind, if we go reference our short-term timeframe Stochastic Momentum, we'll probably notice some pain points for the short-term timeframes right here. And as of right now, we actually do still see it again on CME pointed downwards as long as Bitcoin's below 39,600. Naturally, that number will move down when we get the next closure in 43 minutes and 46 seconds. And because it is so low already right here, I do feel like it'd be kind of aggressive to call another meltdown exactly from where Bitcoin's at right now before maybe a short-term rally. But again, when it comes to short-term rallies, there's not really any talks about even like a short-term reversal, especially as long as you're below 40,400. But I'd go as far to say that everything's irrelevant below 41.5 for BULAs. That'd be the earliest region where I'd say, hey, the hopium scenario is starting to get a little bit of little bit of love right here. But the one supposedly or potentially good thing to the BULAs out there is that because of the way that the weekly closed on both CME and spot price action, I would feel quite comfortable saying, I don't think it's likely to happen, but I'd feel quite comfortable to say that if Bitcoin does trade above last week's high, which is $43,000 on CME, and I believe same thing on spot as well, then I would confirm this as a local low. It would also be the third higher low in a series of higher lows. And it would also be within the context of incredibly low volatility. And at that point, I would be looking for Bitcoin to put in a nice rally, probably finding its way up towards the deeper 50s, low 60s in the coming months. And short term, I'd be looking for it to very likely trade back up into the shallow 50s, the $52,000 region right here, as Bitcoin would still be kind of, doing something like this, putting in a slew of higher lows. It would technically mark off the characteristics of an ascending triangle, which is a bullish reaccumulation formation. And that would have a technical target, all the way up here, on its final move. The problem is again, I don't think that that's very likely, and for reasons we're going to discuss soon enough, I think that the downside is still more likely here. It's just on the shorter term timeframes, I don't feel. I do feel like it might be a little bit aggressive to be looking for it to kind of like come down more from where we're at right now. And within the context of our current volatility signals, if we do go back into a contraction phase, which right now we're not, to be fair, but if we do, and you see that go back down below the moving average, probably going to bounce back up somewhere around shallow $40,000 territory, as momentum oscillators are pretty aggressive to the downside already. So with that in mind, we should also reference the 6 hours. This one typically is pretty damn good. And again, still downside angled as long as Bitcoin's below 40,350. 3 hour, which I also like, is going to be showing downside below 39,000 bucks. So technically above there right now. And hourly is probably up, I would imagine. And yes, it is. And we'll be remaining with upside pressure as long as Bitcoin's closing above 38,850. So short-term timeframes, does Bitcoin bounce? I do think, it's certainly possible here. Bounce targets into the low $40,000 are okay, I guess, if it even gets there. We also do see that funny rates over here on the daily and the hourly are both, somewhat negative. I mean, these are very small numbers here, but it is relevant that 2 days ago, or sorry, not 2 days ago, but yesterday, we did see the lowest funny rates that we've seen in a little bit of time. But ultimately, we do expect negative funding rates when Bitcoin is or an asset is in a strong downtrend. That's exactly what you saw in 2018 for months on end. So yes, shorts are paying to hold their positions, but they're not really being tested all that much. So the problem is that you can't really squeeze a position that's in profit, right? And this whole fucking idea of short squeeze just, oh man, it really grinds my gears. Anyways, so now we need to get into what I think is a little bit more likely, or actually before that, let's go over here to Dixie and let's go address Mr. Sinegra, as I thought that was actually a really, really good question. And for Dixie over here, I am looking for continuation a little bit more, actually. I do think that because of the way that it took out the high area that we looked at from last week, I do look at this as likely to probably trade maybe even to the back end of this blue box territory, somewhere between 102, maybe even as much as 103 or so. So I certainly was wrong on that one last week, but if and when Bitcoin, or sorry, not Bitcoin, but Dixie hits that region, I would be looking for a pullback. And, pullbacks can come quite well far down, maybe even down to 98 or so, give or take about half a buck from that number, which probably correlates to the general markets finding a nice low. Problem is, between that point and reaching this region over here, that would imply likely downside. And long term, I'm massively bullish on this chart, to be fair, based off of the quarterly, which maybe we don't need to go fully into right now. Anyways, let's now go into the fun stuff on Bitcoin, and maybe not so much fun stuff for some people, but we'll start off right on over here. So we're going to start off first with the daily signal. The daily signal that we spoke about from yesterday has been confirmed to the downside. And what am I essentially talking about? First and foremost, we start off over here on daily BBWP, measuring volatility, the dispersion of returns. And what do we see? We see the lowest volatility read for the longest time, basically since January. January's major move to the downside, by the way, or at least I believe it was. Yep, it was. It was actually a very quick, about 25% move to the downside. Oh, whoops, I'm on the wrong pane right here. And basically all of these last 10 iterations that we've seen in the past year and a half here have led towards about a 20% move to the upside or the downside from that expansion time. Now, the reason why I'm calling it out right now is, again, because we are, one of the lowest times within the context of that. And that would imply that the move from this expansion probably is going to be maybe a little bit on the higher end. So perhaps as much as 25 to 30% overall. If we were to kind of forecast price targets based off of that, if expansion comes exactly from here, that put Bitcoin somewhere around about 48,000, maybe a little bit less than that right now because it is 39. To the upside, if that happens, to the downside puts Bitcoin somewhere around about 33-ish, let's say, basically your weekly lows. And then what I've also done over here is I've looked at the stochastic momentum on the daily, and the reason why I'm calling it out is because we confirmed the downside signal from yesterday's video. Not only is it confirming down, but it is also being held within the bearish control zone. So in the past, I would say that the results from looking at stochastic momentum alongside that volatility expansion have been pretty damn good. The problem is we still need to see this actually tick up here. And once it ticks up, you will see, probably a 20, maybe even 30% tick up in percentile, which, means that it's probably going to happen quite fast if and when it does get going. But as long as that is pointed to the downside, it does have a higher probability to break down from here. Maybe after another short-term bounce possible. I don't feel, again, too married to that idea. But out of the last 10 iterations, 8 of them have gone in the same direction as the daily stochastic. So pretty damn good results right there, and would obviously imply, a rather big move. I guess on average, you could say that this happens over about 2 weeks, but there's a big there's like a big variation between a lot of these as I did measure them out. Anyways, on top of that, we need to now talk about, of course, the 5-day, which is also closing today. And the 5-day is one of the big charts that has been, kind of keeping us more on the defensive side, if you will, for this channel. And that is this. Again, the 5-day BBWP is coming down to levels that we really haven't seen low for this long, basically since like July of 2020. Actually more like September 2020, before Bitcoin mounted that assault from about 10,000 to 20,000 bucks actually. And anytime that we have seen it, basically within the teens, it has, on average resulted in about a 45% move from that expansion level. And as of right now, we're getting yet again another tick up here. So it's going to signal that the move is probably coming within this next 5 days after we get this next one, this closure tonight. It is starting to increase the likelihood of that, and also above the moving average as well, which is, kind of what I look for to verify that the expansion is going to happen. Just like the daily typically happens pretty damn fast as well. That first leg typically brings you like another 20 to 30 percentile move on the daily, 5-day BBWP. And just like the daily, the 5-day also has really, really good results with the 5-day stochastic momentum oscillator. In fact, for the past couple of years, it's actually been perfect in the direction alongside the volatility expansion. Again, we haven't seen the volatility expansion just yet, but when we get this next tick, probably within this next 5 days. Well, I would guess. I can certainly be wrong on that, but then we can just kick the can down the road again. But as long as Bitcoin is below this level right here, it will be remaining with downside pressure, and that is $46,000, which is pretty fucking far away. So probably not likely today. And that number will probably go up actually coming into tonight's closure, which again happening at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So do keep an eye on that, because this one, being that it is about a 45% historical signal, would imply that to the downside, I mean, those targets get stretched out a bit more over time, typically over the course of the next 40-ish days, if you will. To the upside, there's your hopium for 60,000 or so, give or take. But as of right now, again, the probabilities favor the downside. On top of that, we have the weekly, which just closed last night, obviously. And what did the weekly do? The weekly on CME is going to cross to the downside for the first time since basically November, when Bitcoin was at all-time highs, albeit it's not in the critical, bullish control zone. To be fair, it is in the neutral zone here, but it'll be remain with downside pressure as long as Bitcoin's below 42,100 and change. And then even more importantly, or perhaps more relevant for right now, the weekly for I guess it doesn't really matter, or it's not that much different, but weekly for spot price action is pivoted at $43,000 or so. So that is to say that, hey, if Bitcoin does trade above last week's high, I would consider this whole thing one mega massive bear trap. You're going to see all of those volatility expansions very likely come with upside price action, which means big targets up into the deep $50,000 in the next month and a half to 2 months, and momentum will flip back above last week's high as well on a weekly schedule. So with incredibly low volatility on the weekly as well. So all of this stuff is incredibly important to me. But as long as Bitcoin remains below those regions, especially just $40,000, for example, I do look at the higher term timeframes as more likely to resolve to the downside. I don't think that is, I think that we can save the monthly look maybe for tomorrow, as it's still got like another week or so. But I think that'll do it for this right now. Hopefully that was in some way helpful, and well, thank you.